In the golden halls of Valdoria Castle, where secrets travel faster than whispers and loyalty costs more than jewels, 12-year-old Princess Amelia discovers that the people trusted to protect her family might be the very ones plotting their downfall. When a simple walk through the castle corridors leads to an overheard conversation that could topple the throne, one shattered phone becomes the spark that ignites a revolution within the palace walls. But in a world where every servant has ears and every wall holds secrets, who can a young princess trust when the very foundation of her royal life begins to crumble? Sometimes the greatest threats come not from enemy kingdoms but from those who smile while serving your morning tea. The morning sun cast long shadows through the towering windows of Valdoria Castle as Princess Amelia hurried down the marble corridor, her schoolbooks clutched tightly against her chest. At 12 years old, she had mastered the art of moving quietly through the castle's endless hallways, a skill that had served her well in avoiding her particularly stern etiquette tutor, Lady Pemberton. The castle bustled with its usual morning activity. Servants polished silver in the great hall. Gardeners tended to the sprawling rose gardens visible through the windows, and guards maintained their stoic positions at every doorway. To most observers, it was another peaceful day in the kingdom of Valdoria, a small but prosperous nation nestled between the mountains of Central Europe. Princess Amelia paused at the intersection of two corridors, listening for the telltale click of Lady Pemberton's heels on the stone floor. Her father, Prince William of Valdoria, had insisted on a normal education for his daughter, but normal seemed impossible when every moment was scheduled, every movement watched, and every conversation potentially scrutinized by the palace staff. The sound of hushed voices drew her attention to a partially open door leading to one of the smaller conference rooms. Curious by nature, Amelia approached carefully, recognizing the voice of Marcus Hartwell, her father's most trusted aide and confidant. Marcus had been with the family for nearly 15 years, rising from a junior secretary to the prince's right hand. Everyone in the castle respected him, and Princess Amelia had always thought of him as something like an uncle. She pressed herself against the cool stone wall and listened, expecting to hear routine discussions about her father's schedule or upcoming diplomatic meetings. Instead, what she heard made her blood run cold. "The prince suspects nothing," Marcus was saying in a voice barely above a whisper. "He's completely focused on the trade negotiations with Northmere. He has no idea we've been monitoring every phone call, every private conversation." Another voice, one Amelia didn't immediately recognize, responded with equal quiet. "And the princess? She's been asking questions about the new security protocols." "Princess Amelia is just a child," Marcus replied dismissively. "She notices things, yes, but she doesn't understand their significance. Besides, children are easily distracted." The princess felt her cheeks burn with indignation at being called just a child. But she remained perfectly still, straining to hear every word. "The recordings from last week's private dinner are particularly interesting," the unknown voice continued. "The prince's concerns about the northern border defenses, his doubts about General Morrison's loyalty, all of it could be quite valuable to our friends in Eastmarch." Amelia's heart began to pound. Eastmarch was Valdoria's longtime rival, a neighboring kingdom that had been pressing claims on Valdorian territory for decades. Her history tutor had explained how the two kingdoms had maintained an uneasy peace, but tensions always simmered beneath diplomatic pleasantries. "The beauty of this arrangement," Marcus continued, "is that Prince William trusts me completely. Every classified briefing, every strategic discussion, every private family conversation passes through me eventually. Our contacts in Eastmarch are paying very well for this level of access." "What about the other family members? Princess Catherine?" "The princess is focused on her charitable work and rarely involves herself in political matters. She's not a concern. The real challenge will be maintaining this access once Prince William eventually assumes the throne. We need to gather as much intelligence as possible before that transition." Princess Amelia felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. Marcus, the man who had taught her to play chess, who remembered her birthday every year with a thoughtful gift, who had comforted her when she was homesick during her first week at boarding school, was selling her family's secrets to their enemies. She slowly backed away from the door, her mind racing with questions and implications. How long had this been going on? Who else was involved? Did her parents have any idea that their most trusted advisor was betraying them? As she retreated down the corridor, Princess Amelia accidentally backed into a small side table holding a decorative vase. The porcelain piece wobbled precariously, and she reached out quickly to steady it. In her panic, she fumbled with her books, and one of them fell to the floor with a loud thump that echoed through the stone hallway. The voices in the conference room immediately stopped. "What was that?" she heard Marcus ask. "Probably just a servant," the other voice replied, but Amelia could hear footsteps approaching the door. She scooped up her fallen book and hurried away as quietly as possible, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it could be heard throughout the castle. As she turned the corner, she could hear the conference room door opening fully, and Marcus's voice calling out. "Hello? Is someone there?" Princess Amelia didn't stop running until she reached her private chambers. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to catch her breath and process what she had just learned. Her hands were shaking as she set her books on her desk and tried to think clearly about her next steps. The problem was enormous and complicated. She couldn't simply run to her parents with accusations against Marcus without proof. Adults, she had learned from experience, rarely took the word of a 12-year-old seriously, especially when that word contradicted their own judgment about someone they trusted. But she also couldn't ignore what she had heard. If Marcus was really selling state secrets to Eastmarch, her entire family was in danger. The information he was providing could be used to undermine Valdoria's defenses, manipulate trade negotiations, or even plan more serious hostile actions. Princess Amelia walked to her window and looked out over the castle grounds. Everything appeared normal and peaceful, but now she understood that appearances could be deeply deceiving. Somewhere in this castle, people she had trusted were working against her family, and she was possibly the only person who knew about it. She thought about the unknown voice in the conference room. Marcus wasn't working alone. There was a network of people involved in this betrayal, and she had no way of knowing how extensive it might be. Any servant, any guard, any advisor could potentially be part of the conspiracy. The weight of this knowledge felt crushing. She was just one young girl, against what appeared to be an organized effort to undermine her family's rule. But as she stood there, looking out at the kingdom her family had protected for generations, Princess Amelia felt something else growing alongside her fear. Determination. If the adults couldn't be trusted to protect themselves from this threat, then she would have to find a way to do it herself. She was a princess of Valdoria, and that title came with responsibilities even if she was only 12 years old. The first step, she decided, would be to gather more information. She needed to understand the full scope of Marcus's betrayal, identify his co-conspirators, and find concrete proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Princess Amelia spent the rest of the morning developing a plan. She would use her position as just a child to her advantage. Adults often ignored children or spoke freely around them, assuming they weren't paying attention or wouldn't understand the significance of what they heard. She would begin by observing Marcus more carefully, noting his movements, his meetings, and his communications. She would also pay closer attention to other staff members, looking for signs of suspicious behavior or unexplained changes in routine. Most importantly, she would need to find a way to document what she discovered. If she was going to expose this conspiracy, she would need evidence that even skeptical adults couldn't dismiss. As lunchtime approached, Princess Amelia made her way to the family dining room, where she typically ate with her parents when their schedules allowed. Today, both Prince William and Princess Catherine were present, discussing the morning's correspondence over their meal. "Good afternoon, darling," Princess Catherine greeted her daughter warmly. "How are your morning lessons?" "Fine, Mother," Princess Amelia replied, taking her seat and trying to appear normal despite the turmoil in her mind. Prince William looked up from a stack of documents. "I apologize for being distracted, Amelia. We're dealing with some complicated negotiations with Northmere, and there are many details to review." "Marcus has been invaluable in helping me organize all the information," he continued. "I don't know what I would do without his assistance." Princess Amelia felt her stomach clench at the mention of Marcus's name, but she managed to nod and smile. "He seems very helpful," she said carefully. "Indeed he is," Prince William agreed. "Marcus understands the complexities of international relations better than most diplomats I've worked with. His insights have been crucial in developing our strategy." The irony of her father's praise made Princess Amelia feel sick. Marcus's insights were probably being shared with Valdoria's enemies, giving Eastmarch advanced knowledge of every negotiating position and strategic decision. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus himself appeared in the doorway of the dining room. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 40s, with graying hair and the kind of confident bearing that inspired trust. Looking at him now, Princess Amelia struggled to reconcile this familiar, respected figure with the voice she had heard plotting against her family just hours earlier. "Your Highness," Marcus said, bowing slightly to Prince William. "I wanted to update you on the afternoon schedule. The ambassador from Northmere has requested a private meeting before tomorrow's formal sessions." "Excellent," Prince William replied. "What's your assessment of their position?" "I believe they're more eager to reach an agreement than they're letting on," Marcus said smoothly. "Their recent economic troubles make this trade partnership crucial for them." "We may have more leverage than we initially thought." Princess Amelia watched this exchange with new understanding. Marcus was collecting information about Valdoria's negotiating strategy, information that would be incredibly valuable to Eastmarch's interests. If Eastmarch knew exactly how much leverage Valdoria thought it had, they could develop counter-strategies or even interfere with the negotiations in ways that would benefit their own position.
"Thank you, Marcus," Prince William said. "Your analysis is always spot on."
"Please arrange the meeting with the ambassador." "Of course, Your Highness."
"Will there be anything else?" "Not at the moment. We'll continue our discussion after lunch." As Marcus left the dining room, Princess Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. The casual way he gathered sensitive information, the trust her parents placed in him, the ease with which he moved through the most secure areas of the castle, it all made him the perfect spy. The remainder of lunch passed in a blur for Princess Amelia. Her parents continued discussing various state matters, unaware that every word might eventually find its way to their enemies. She responded to their questions about her studies and her plans for the afternoon, but her mind was focused entirely on the enormous secret she now carried. After lunch, as her parents returned to their duties, Princess Amelia excused herself to the castle library. The vast room, with its towering shelves and quiet reading nooks, had always been one of her favorite places. Today, she hoped it might also provide her with the resources she needed to understand the political situation she had stumbled into. She pulled several books on Valdorian history and international relations, particularly focusing on the kingdom's relationship with Eastmarch. As she read, a clearer picture began to emerge of just how dangerous Marcus's betrayal could be. Eastmarch had been pressuring Valdoria's northern territories for decades, claiming historical rights to several border regions. Any detailed information about Valdoria's defensive capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, or diplomatic strategies could give Eastmarch significant advantages in future confrontations. The trade negotiations with Northmere were particularly sensitive because they involved agreements that would strengthen Valdoria's economic position and provide new strategic partnerships. If Eastmarch could sabotage these negotiations or gain advance knowledge of their terms, it could seriously damage Valdoria's long-term security. Princess Amelia realized that Marcus's betrayal wasn't just about selling secrets for money. It was about systematically weakening Valdoria's position in preparation for some larger move by Eastmarch. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, she knew that time was running out. Every day that Marcus remained in his position gave him access to more classified information and more opportunities to damage her kingdom's interests. But she also knew that exposing him would require more than just her word against his. She needed proof, and getting that proof would mean putting herself in considerable danger. Princess Amelia closed the history books and made her decision. Tomorrow she would begin her own investigation, using every advantage her position as just a child could provide. She would uncover the full extent of this conspiracy, gather the evidence needed to expose it, and protect her family and her kingdom no matter what the personal cost might be. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Princess Amelia's mood as she prepared to begin her dangerous investigation. She had barely slept, her mind churning with plans and possibilities. Every shadow in her room had seemed suspicious. Every creak of the old castle walls had made her jump. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would allow her to move quietly through the castle. Her regular morning routine would provide the perfect cover for her surveillance activities. Adults expected to see her moving through the corridors on her way to lessons, meals, and various activities. Her first target was Marcus's office, located in the administrative wing of the castle. She needed to understand his daily routine, identify when he might be vulnerable to observation, and look for opportunities to gather evidence of his treachery. Princess Amelia made her way through the castle's maze-like corridors, stopping frequently to listen for approaching footsteps or voices. The morning bustle provided excellent cover as servants hurried about their duties and various officials prepared for the day's business. Marcus's office was situated at the end of a long hallway with windows overlooking the castle's eastern gardens. Princess Amelia positioned herself in an alcove where she could observe his comings and goings without being easily noticed. She pretended to read a book while actually watching every person who entered or left the office. Over the course of 2 hours, she observed Marcus meeting with several people. Most appeared to be routine business junior staff members delivering reports, minor officials seeking guidance on various matters. But one visitor caught her particular attention. Lady Evelyn Blackwood was the castle's head of communications, responsible for managing correspondence and official announcements. She was a stern woman in her 50s, known for her efficiency and discretion. Her meeting with Marcus lasted nearly 30 minutes, unusually long for what should have been routine coordination. When Lady Blackwood emerged from the office, Princess Amelia noticed something odd about her expression. Instead of the businesslike demeanor she typically displayed, Lady Blackwood looked nervous, almost furtive. She glanced around the corridor carefully before hurrying away. clutching a manila folder tightly against her chest. This struck Princess Amelia as highly suspicious. Lady Blackwood had been with the royal household for over a decade and was known for her unflappable composure. What could make such an experienced professional appear so anxious? Princess Amelia decided to follow Lady Blackwood, maintaining a careful distance as they moved through the castle. Her target headed not toward the communications office but in the opposite direction, toward a section of the castle that housed storage rooms and rarely used chambers. The princess had to be extremely careful now, as this part of the castle was much quieter, with fewer people around to provide cover for her movements. She pressed herself against walls, ducked behind furniture, and used every shadow to avoid detection. Lady Blackwood stopped at a door that Princess Amelia recognized as leading to an old records room, one that had been largely unused since the castle's filing systems had been modernized several years earlier. The communications chief produced a key from her pocket and unlocked the door, disappearing inside. Princess Amelia crept closer, hoping to hear what was happening in the room. The door was thick, but she could make out the sound of papers rustling and what might have been a conversation, though she couldn't distinguish specific words. After about 10 minutes, Lady Blackwood emerged from the room, no longer carrying the manila folder. She locked the door carefully and looked around nervously before hurrying back toward the main part of the castle. This behavior was definitely not normal. Why would the head of communications need to access an old storage room? Why did she appear so nervous about it? And what had happened to the folder she had been carrying? Princess Amelia waited until Lady Blackwood was out of sight, then approached the locked door. She examined it carefully, looking for any way to gain access to whatever was hidden inside. The lock appeared to be a standard castle security lock. Nothing she could reasonably hope to pick with her limited skills. However, as she studied the door more closely, she noticed something interesting.
There was a small gap between the door and the frame, just wide enough that she might be able to see inside if she could find the right angle.
Princess Amelia knelt down and pressed her eye to the gap, trying to peer into the darkened room. At first, she could see nothing but shadows. But as her eyes adjusted, she began to make out shapes and objects. The room contained several filing cabinets and stacks of boxes, as she had expected from an old records room. But in the center of the room, she could see a table that definitely hadn't been there when this room was last used for legitimate storage. On the table were what appeared to be documents, photographs, and some kind of technical equipment. She couldn't make out the details, but the setup looked like some kind of intelligence operation rather than simple document storage. This discovery confirmed her worst fears. The conspiracy against her family was more organized and extensive than she had initially realized. They had established a hidden base of operations right in the castle, using an apparently abandoned room that no one would think to check. Princess Amelia backed away from the door, her mind racing with the implications. If Lady Blackwood was involved with Marcus, then the conspiracy included people in key positions throughout the castle administration. They could be monitoring communications, intercepting sensitive documents, and coordinating their activities right under her family's noses. She needed to gather more information, but she also needed to be much more careful. If Marcus and his co-conspirators suspected they were being watched, they might accelerate whatever plans they had or simply disappear, taking their intelligence operation with them. As she made her way back through the castle, Princess Amelia encountered Thomas, one of the younger guards who had always been friendly to her. He was in his mid-20s, had been with the castle security force for about 3 years, and had a reputation for being both competent and trustworthy. "Good morning, Princess Amelia," Thomas said with a respectful nod. "You're exploring the castle early today." "Just looking for a quiet place to read," she replied, trying to sound casual. "Some parts of the castle are so peaceful." "Indeed they are," Thomas agreed. "Though I sometimes worry about security in those older sections. We don't patrol them as regularly as we should." This comment caught Princess Amelia's attention. Was Thomas hinting that he had noticed something suspicious, or was he simply making casual conversation about castle security? "Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" she asked carefully. Thomas glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard, then lowered his voice slightly. "Well, I probably shouldn't mention this, but I have noticed some odd activity in the records wing. People coming and going at strange hours, carrying materials that don't seem to belong there." Princess Amelia's heart began to race. Thomas had noticed the same suspicious activities she was investigating. But was he trustworthy, or could he be part of the conspiracy himself? "What kind of materials?" she asked. "Modern equipment mostly. Computers, communication devices, things that wouldn't normally be needed in a storage area. I mentioned it to my supervisor, but he told me not to worry about it. Said it was probably just modernization efforts." "Who is your supervisor?" "Captain Morrison oversees castle security. He reports directly to Marcus Hartwell on security matters."
The mention of Marcus made Princess Amelia's blood run cold. If Marcus was controlling security reporting, he could easily suppress any observations that might expose his activities. "Thomas," she said carefully, "if you noticed something that you thought might be a security concern but your supervisor told you to ignore it, what would you do?" The young guard looked thoughtful.
That's a difficult situation, Princess. We're trained to follow the chain of command, but our ultimate loyalty is to the royal family and the kingdom. What if the security concern involved someone high up in the administration? Thomas studied her face carefully.
"Princess Amelia, are you asking me these questions for a specific reason?" She realized she had reached a crucial decision point. She could either trust Thomas with her suspicions, potentially gaining a valuable ally, or she could retreat and continue her investigation alone, avoiding the risk of confiding in someone who might betray her.
The weight of her secret was becoming overwhelming. She was just 12 years old, carrying knowledge that could affect the security of her entire kingdom. The temptation to share that burden with someone who might be able to help was almost irresistible. "Thomas," she said quietly, "if I told you something that sounded unbelievable, would you listen to me seriously? Princess, you're a member of the royal family.
"I would listen to anything you had to tell me, and I would take it very seriously indeed." Princess Amelia took a deep breath and made her choice.
I overheard Marcus Hartwell discussing plans to sell state secrets to Eastmarch. I think Lady Blackwood is involved, and they're using the old records room as some kind of operations center."
Thomas's expression grew very serious. "That's an extremely grave accusation, Princess. Are you certain about what you heard?" "I heard him talking about monitoring my father's phone calls and private conversations."
He specifically mentioned providing information to contacts in Eastmarch and being paid for access to classified briefings. "And Lady Blackwood?"
I followed her this morning.
"She took documents from Marcus's office to the old records room. There's equipment in there that doesn't belong, and she was acting very nervous about the whole thing." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the implications of what she had told him. "Princess, if what you're saying is true, this represents a massive security breach. We need to gather solid evidence before we can take action." "That's what I was thinking too. But I don't know how to get proof without putting myself in danger."
"You've already put yourself in considerable danger by investigating this alone," Thomas pointed out. "If Marcus and his associates discover what you know, they might take drastic action to protect themselves." The thought hadn't fully occurred to her before, but Princess Amelia realized that Thomas was right.
She wasn't just investigating a political conspiracy. She was potentially threatening the livelihood and freedom of dangerous people who had already demonstrated their willingness to betray their country. "What do you think we should do?" she asked.
"We need to be very careful and very smart," Thomas replied. "First, we need to document everything you've observed. Then, we need to gather additional evidence that would convince your parents and other authorities. Finally, we need to make sure we have a way to protect you if the situation becomes dangerous. How can we gather more evidence?" Thomas thought for a moment. "The records room you mentioned. If we could get inside and document what's there, that would provide concrete proof of unauthorized activities. But we'd need to do it when we're certain the room is empty." "Do you have access to keys for that section of the castle?" "Not officially, but there are master keys that senior guards can access in emergencies. I might be able to arrange an inspection of that area, particularly if I expressed concerns about security vulnerabilities in the older sections."
This sounded like a viable plan, but Princess Amelia was also worried about the risks. What if Marcus finds out that you've been investigating? That's a risk we'll have to manage carefully. But Princess, the alternative is allowing this conspiracy to continue, potentially putting your entire family and the kingdom at risk. As they talked, Princess Amelia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief at finally having someone to share her burden with, and apprehension about the dangerous path they were now embarking on together. "When should we try to access the records room?" she asked. "Tonight after the evening shift change. There's usually a brief period when that section of the castle is unmonitored.
If we time it right, we should be able to get in, document what we find, and get out without being detected. What should I do until then?" "Act completely normal. Attend your lessons, have your meals with your parents. Follow your usual routine exactly. Don't do anything that might alert Marcus or his associates that you suspect anything.
And if they approach me or ask me questions, answer honestly about your normal activities, but don't volunteer any information. If they seem suspicious, find an excuse to leave the conversation, and find me immediately." As they prepared to part ways, Thomas made one final point. "Princess, what we're doing tonight will be dangerous. If we're caught, we could be accused of espionage ourselves, or worse. Are you certain you want to go through with this?"
Princess Amelia thought about her parents, trusting and unsuspecting, going about their duties while enemies gathered intelligence around them. She thought about her kingdom, potentially vulnerable to attack because of information being sold to their rivals.
She thought about Marcus, smiling and helpful, while plotting their downfall.
"I'm certain," she said firmly. "This is my family and my kingdom. I won't let them be betrayed." The rest of the day passed agonizingly slowly for Princess Amelia.
She attended her afternoon history lesson, struggled through etiquette practice with Lady Pemberton, and joined her parents for dinner, all while her mind was focused on the evening's dangerous mission. During dinner, Marcus joined them to discuss the ongoing negotiations with Northmere.
Princess Amelia watched him carefully, looking for any sign that he suspected her knowledge of his activities, but he appeared completely normal, offering insights and recommendations with the same helpful demeanor he had always displayed.
The ambassador seemed particularly interested in our northern border security arrangements, Marcus mentioned casually. He asked several detailed questions about patrol schedules and defensive positions. Princess Amelia's fork nearly slipped from her hand. Marcus was reporting intelligence gathering efforts right at the dinner table, probably to see how her father would respond to such probing questions. That seems like an odd concern for a trade negotiation, Prince William replied thoughtfully.
"I had the same thought," Marcus agreed smoothly.
But apparently Northmere has had some border issues with their eastern neighbors recently. They're probably just being cautious about any new partnerships.
The ease with which Marcus deflected suspicion was chilling. He was simultaneously gathering intelligence and managing her father's perceptions, ensuring that nothing would seem suspicious enough to warrant investigation. After dinner, Princess Amelia excused herself to her chambers, claiming she wanted to read before bed. In reality, she spent the evening reviewing everything she had learned and preparing mentally for the night's mission. As the castle settled into its nighttime routine, she waited in her room, watching the corridor outside her door for Thomas's signal. At precisely 11 o'clock, she saw a brief flash of light from a small mirror, the agreed-upon sign that it was time to begin their dangerous investigation into the heart of the conspiracy threatening her family. Princess Amelia slipped quietly from her chambers, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The castle corridors were dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move with each step she took. Every sound seemed amplified in the nighttime stillness, the soft whisper of her slippers on stone, the distant tick of an ancient clock, the barely perceptible hum of the castle's heating system. She made her way carefully toward the predetermined meeting point, a small alcove near the library where Thomas had promised to wait. The route took her through some of the castle's most familiar areas, but everything looked different and somehow more threatening in the darkness. Thomas was already waiting when she arrived, dressed in dark clothing rather than his usual guard uniform.
He had a small bag with him containing what she assumed were the tools they would need for their investigation. "Are you ready for this, Princess?" he asked quietly.
"As ready as I can be," she replied, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. "Remember, if anything goes wrong, if we encounter anyone or hear any suspicious sounds, we separate immediately. You head back to your chambers, and I'll handle any explanations that might be needed." They began their careful journey toward the records wing, moving through corridors that Thomas had scouted earlier in the day.
He had identified a route that avoided the regular guard patrols and stayed away from areas with motion sensors or security cameras. The older section of the castle felt distinctly different from the modernized areas where the royal family lived and worked. Here, the corridors were narrower, the ceilings lower, and the whole atmosphere more oppressive. Princess Amelia could understand why this area had been largely abandoned. It felt isolated from the warmth and life of the main castle. As they approached the records room, Thomas held up his hand, signaling for complete silence. They listened carefully for any sounds that might indicate the presence of other people. The silence was complete except for their own breathing and the distant sounds of the castle's mechanical systems. Thomas produced a set of keys from his bag and began working on the lock. Princess Amelia watched anxiously, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, she heard the soft click of the lock disengaging. Thomas opened the door just wide enough for them to slip inside, then closed it quickly behind them. The room was completely dark, but Thomas had brought a small flashlight that he switched on, keeping the beam pointed downward to avoid any light escaping under the door. What they found exceeded even Princess Amelia's worst expectations. The room had been completely transformed into a sophisticated intelligence operation. Along one wall were several filing cabinets, but these weren't the dusty storage units she had expected. They were modern, secure cabinets with electronic locks. On a large table in the center of the room were multiple computers, communication equipment, and stacks of documents and photographs. Thomas examined the setup with the trained eye of a security professional. "This is extremely sophisticated," he whispered. "This isn't just someone selling the occasional piece of information.
This is a full-scale espionage operation. Princess Amelia moved closer to the documents on the table. Even in the dim light of Thomas's flashlight, she could see that they included floor plans of the castle, schedules of her family's activities, and what appeared to be transcripts of private conversations. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to a folder labeled Northern Border Defenses. Inside were detailed maps, patrol schedules, and assessments of military capabilities. Exactly the kind of information that would be invaluable to a hostile neighbor planning some kind of action against Valdoria. Thomas was examining the communication equipment. "This is professional-grade surveillance gear," he said quietly.
They've been monitoring phone calls, probably recording conversations, maybe even intercepting electronic communications. As they documented the contents of the room with Thomas's small camera, Princess Amelia made a disturbing discovery. Hidden beneath some other papers was a folder with her own name on it. Inside, she found photographs of herself taken from various locations around the castle, detailed notes about her daily routine, and what appeared to be psychological assessments of her personality and behavior.
"They've been watching me specifically," she realized with horror. Thomas examined the contents of her file. "This suggests they see you as either a potential threat or a potential asset. Either way, it means you're in considerable danger."
As they continued their investigation, they found evidence that the conspiracy was even larger than they had imagined. There were files on multiple members of the castle staff, indicating that Marcus had been recruiting allies and identifying potential threats for some time.
One file that caught Thomas's attention contained information about him. "They know I'd been asking questions about security in this area," he said grimly.
"We may have less time than I thought." Princess Amelia was studying a calendar that appeared to show planned activities for the conspiracy. Most of the entries were in code, but one date stood out. It was marked in red and labeled Final Phase. "What do you think Final Phase means?" she asked.
Thomas looked at the date. "That's next week, during the state dinner for the Northmere delegation.
If they're planning something dramatic, that would be the perfect opportunity. Maximum impact with international witnesses present." The implications were terrifying.
Whatever Marcus and his associates were planning, it was scheduled to happen at one of the most important diplomatic events of the year, when the castle would be filled with foreign dignitaries and media attention would be focused on Valdoria. As they prepared to leave the room, taking with them photographic evidence of what they had found, Thomas made one final discovery that changed everything.
Hidden in the back of one of the filing cabinets was a communication device that was actively recording their conversation. "We've been set up," Thomas whispered urgently.
They knew we were coming. Even as he spoke, they could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Multiple people moving toward the records room. "Is there another way out of here?" Princess Amelia asked desperately.
Thomas examined the room quickly. There was a small window, but it was too high and too narrow to provide an escape route.
They were trapped. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Then they heard a familiar voice. Marcus Hartwell. "I know you're in there," he said calmly. "Princess Amelia, Thomas, please come out. We need to have a conversation." Princess Amelia and Thomas looked at each other with growing desperation. They had the evidence they needed to expose the conspiracy, but they were about to be captured by the very people they were trying to stop. "What do we do?" Princess Amelia whispered. Before Thomas could answer, the door opened and light flooded the room. Marcus entered, followed by Lady Blackwood and two men in dark clothing whom Princess Amelia didn't recognize. "I'm disappointed, Princess," Marcus said with false concern. "I had hoped you would be content to remain just a child, as I said before, but it appears you're more observant than I gave you credit for." "You're a traitor," Princess Amelia said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. "I prefer to think of myself as a pragmatist," Marcus replied smoothly. "Valdoria is a small kingdom in a changing world. Eastmarch offers stability and prosperity. I'm simply helping to facilitate what is inevitable, by selling out your own country, by ensuring a peaceful transition rather than a violent conquest. The information I've provided has allowed Eastmarch to plan a bloodless takeover. Your family will be allowed to live in comfortable exile, and the people of Valdoria will benefit from Eastmarch's superior resources and leadership." Thomas stepped protectively in front of Princess Amelia. "You won't get away with this. People will notice that we're missing." Lady Blackwood spoke for the first time. "Actually, they won't. We've prepared explanations for both of your absences. Princess Amelia has come down with a sudden illness and is being kept in isolation. Thomas has been reassigned to a security detail in the Northern Territories." Marcus nodded approvingly. "We've learned to plan for every contingency. This operation has been years in the making." "What are you going to do with us?" Princess Amelia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "That depends largely on your cooperation," Marcus replied. We have no desire to harm anyone unnecessarily, but we cannot allow you to interfere with the final phase of our operation.
The state dinner, Princess Amelia said.
Very good.
Yes, during the state dinner, certain revelations will be made about your father's government, financial improprieties, security failures, evidence of incompetent leadership. The Northmere delegation will be so concerned about partnering with an unstable regime that they'll withdraw from negotiations entirely. And then Eastmarch will generously offer to provide emergency assistance to prevent a governmental collapse.
Their representatives will arrive within hours, bringing stability and order to a kingdom in crisis. The plan was diabolical in its sophistication.
By destroying Valdoria's credibility at precisely the moment when international witnesses were present, Marcus and his associates would create the justification for Eastmarch's intervention. The evidence you'll present will be fabricated, Thomas said.
Some of it will be genuine, Marcus admitted. Your father has made mistakes, as all leaders do.
We've simply compiled and presented those mistakes in a way that will be most damaging to his reputation. And some of it will be enhanced or recontextualized to serve our purposes.
The art of intelligence work is knowing how to present facts in ways that support your objectives. Princess Amelia felt sick as she realized the scope of the betrayal.
Marcus hadn't just been selling secrets. He had been systematically documenting every flaw, every mistake, every moment of uncertainty or weakness in her father's leadership, preparing to use them as weapons. What happens to my family after Eastmarch takes over? As I said, comfortable exile.
A nice estate in the countryside. Sufficient resources for a dignified retirement from public life. Your father will be allowed to write his memoirs, your mother can continue her charitable work on a smaller scale, and you can complete your education at any institution you choose.
And if we refuse to cooperate with this plan? Marcus's expression hardened. Then the transition becomes more difficult for everyone involved.
Prison sentences for treason, confiscation of assets, public trials that would be humiliating for your family. I would prefer to avoid such unpleasantness.
Princess Amelia understood the threat clearly. Cooperate with the destruction of her family's rule, or face even worse consequences.
I need time to think, she said. Of course.
You have until tomorrow evening to decide. The state dinner is in 3 days, and we need your cooperation to ensure everything proceeds smoothly. What kind of cooperation? Nothing dramatic. Simply continue your normal routine. Don't raise any alarms. And when the time comes, be prepared to make a public statement supporting the transition of leadership.
You want me to betray my own family publicly? I want you to help them accept reality gracefully. Sometimes the most loving thing a daughter can do is help her parents recognize when it's time to step aside.
As Princess Amelia and Thomas were led from the records room under guard, she realized that her investigation had succeeded beyond her expectations and failed catastrophically. She now knew exactly what Marcus and his associates were planning, but she was powerless to stop it.
The evidence they had gathered was now in the hands of their enemies. The state dinner was only 3 days away,
and she had less than 24 hours to decide whether to betray her family to save them from an even worse fate. As they were escorted through the dark corridors toward what would essentially be house arrest, Princess Amelia's mind was already working on a new plan.
Marcus had underestimated her once before. She would make sure he didn't have the chance to do it again.
But first, she needed to find a way to get a message to her parents, warning them of what was coming. The problem was that Marcus controlled all the normal communication channels, and now he would be watching her every move.
As they reached the wing where she would be confined, Princess Amelia caught Thomas's eye and saw the same determination she felt burning in her own heart. They weren't defeated yet. They just needed to be smarter and more resourceful than their enemies expected. The final battle for her family's throne was about to begin, and Princess Amelia was determined to win it no matter what the personal cost might be.
Princess Amelia spent a sleepless night in what had become her prison, a comfortable guest suite in the castle's east wing, but with guards stationed outside and all communication devices removed. Marcus had been thorough in his precautions, but he had made one crucial mistake. He continued to underestimate the resourcefulness of a 12-year-old princess who refused to accept defeat.
As dawn broke over the castle grounds, Princess Amelia examined every inch of her confinement, looking for any opportunity to escape or communicate with the outside world. The room had been stripped of phones, computers, and even writing materials, but Marcus's people had overlooked something important.
Hidden behind a loose stone in the ancient fireplace was a servant's bell system that dated back centuries, a network of mechanical bells and pulleys that had once allowed the castle's occupants to summon help from anywhere in the building. The system had been abandoned when modern intercoms were installed, but Princess Amelia remembered her governess mentioning that some of the old mechanisms might still be functional.
Working carefully with a hairpin, she managed to activate one of the bell pulls. Somewhere deep in the castle's foundations, a bell rang with a pattern that had once meant urgent assistance needed in the East Wing. She waited anxiously, not knowing if anyone would remember the old system or recognize its significance.
After nearly an hour, she heard a soft scratching at the fireplace. Someone was working on the stonework from the other side. Eventually, a small section of the fireplace back panel shifted, revealing the concerned face of Mrs. Harrison, the castle's head housekeeper. Mrs. L. Harrison had been with the royal family for over 30 years and knew every secret passage and hidden mechanism in the ancient building. Princess Amelia, she whispered urgently.
What are you doing in here? The castle is buzzing with rumors about you being ill. Mrs. Dyack.
Harrison, I need your help desperately. Everything you've heard is a lie. Marcus Hartwell and several others are planning to overthrow my parents. They've been selling secrets to Eastmarch and planning to destroy my family's reputation at the state dinner. The housekeeper's expression grew grave. I've suspected something wasn't right. There have been too many strange activities, people in places they shouldn't be, equipment appearing and disappearing. Can you get a message to my parents without Marcus knowing? Perhaps, but it would be extremely dangerous. He's watching everyone closely now. Princess Amelia quickly explained everything she had discovered. The surveillance operation, the planned fabricated evidence, the timeline for Eastmarch's takeover. Harrison listened with growing alarm. This is worse than I feared, the housekeeper said when Princess Amelia finished. But I think I know a way to help. Your parents are attending a private breakfast with the Northmere delegation this morning, in the Blue Salon. That room has an old servant's entrance that's been sealed, but I have the keys. Can you get me there? Too risky. But I can get close enough to slip them a message. What should I tell them? Princess Amelia thought quickly. The message had to be brief, believable, and specific enough to prompt immediate action. Tell them that Marcus has been recording their private conversations and selling the recordings to Eastmarch. Tell them to check the old records room in the storage wing. They'll find the evidence there. And tell them that tomorrow night's state dinner is when Marcus plans to present fabricated evidence to destroy Father's reputation in front of the Northmere delegation. Mrs. Harrison nodded grimly. I'll find a way to get this information to them. But Princess, even if they believe it, Marcus will know his plan has been exposed. He may accelerate his timeline or take more drastic action. That's a risk we have to take. My family is in danger and the kingdom is at stake. What about you and Thomas? If Marcus realizes you've warned your parents, he may harm you. Princess Amelia had been thinking about this problem all night. Mrs. Harrison, do you remember the old escape tunnels that were built during the castle's construction? They lead from various points in the castle to exits beyond the walls, but they haven't been used in decades, and some of them may be blocked or unsafe. Do any of them connect to this wing? There's one that runs from the wine cellars beneath this section to an exit near the old mill. It was designed to allow the royal family to escape during sieges. Could you guide Thomas and me through that tunnel? Mrs. Harrison considered the logistics. It would be dangerous and I'd need to create a distraction to get Thomas away from his guards. But yes, it might be possible. What kind of distraction? Leave that to me. I've been managing crises in this castle for 30 years. But Princess, where would you go? Even if you escaped the castle, Marcus's people might find you. Princess Amelia had been considering this question as well. The Royal Guard's garrison in the village. Captain Fletcher has been loyal to our family for 20 years. If we can reach him with evidence of the conspiracy, he can mobilize forces loyal to the crown. That's assuming Marcus hasn't already infiltrated the garrison. It's a risk, but it's our best option. Mrs. C.P. Harrison, how much time do we have? The breakfast with the Northmere delegation starts in 2 hours. If I'm going to get a message to your parents, it has to be then. The escape attempt would need to happen this afternoon while Marcus is occupied with managing the situation after your parents learn the truth.
They refined their plan quickly.
Mrs. Harrison would warn Princess Amelia's parents during the breakfast meeting, then return to arrange Thomas's rescue and guide them both through the escape tunnel. Meanwhile, Princess Amelia would prepare for the dangerous journey and gather any additional evidence that might help convince Captain Fletcher and the loyal guards. After Mrs. Caffert's Harrison disappeared back through the fireplace passage, Princess Amelia spent the morning planning every detail of their escape. She had to assume that Marcus would react violently once he realized his conspiracy had been exposed. By this afternoon, the castle might become a battlefield between those loyal to the crown and those working for Eastmarch. At precisely 10 o'clock, she heard raised voices from somewhere else in the castle. The sounds were distant but clearly indicated some kind of confrontation. Her heart raced as she realized that her parents had received Mrs. Harrison's warning and were confronting Marcus about his betrayal.
The voices grew louder and more numerous. She could hear people running through corridors, doors slamming, and what might have been furniture being overturned. The confrontation was escalating beyond anything she had anticipated.
Then came the sound that chilled her blood, a gunshot echoing through the stone corridors. Princess Amelia pressed her ear to the door, trying to understand what was happening.
The voices had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence that was somehow more frightening than the previous commotion. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she heard footsteps approaching her door. Multiple people walking with military precision. When the door opened, she found herself facing Marcus. But his demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the smooth, diplomatic facade. He looked haggard and desperate, his clothes disheveled and his eyes hard with the knowledge that his carefully laid plans were falling apart.
"Your message was delivered, Princess," he said coldly. "Unfortunately, your parents chose not to cooperate with the peaceful transition we had arranged. What have you done to them?" she demanded.
"They're alive, but they're no longer in a position to interfere with our operation. The state dinner has been moved up to this evening. We can't wait any longer."
"Moved up? How can you possibly explain that to the Northmere delegation?" "Emergency circumstances. A credible threat to the royal family has been discovered, requiring immediate protective measures."
The delegation will be told that we're accelerating the meetings for their own safety. Princess Amelia realized that Marcus had adapted his plan with ruthless efficiency. Rather than waiting to destroy her father's reputation at the scheduled state dinner, he was using the confrontation itself as justification for emergency measures. "Where are my parents?" "Secure. They're being protected from the dangerous elements that have infiltrated the castle. You'll be reunited with them after tonight's events, assuming you cooperate fully."
"And if I don't cooperate, then your family's transition from power becomes significantly more difficult. Prison sentences, treason trials, possible charges against you as well for your espionage activities." The threat was clear, but Princess Amelia was no longer the frightened child who had first overheard Marcus's conspiracy. The events of the past few days had forced her to grow up quickly, and she now understood that sometimes courage meant accepting personal risk to protect others.
"I won't help you destroy my family's reign," she said firmly. "Then you've chosen the difficult path for everyone involved."
Marcus signaled to his associates, who moved to escort Princess Amelia from the room.
But as they prepared to leave, an explosion somewhere in the castle shook the entire building. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered ominously. "What was that?" Marcus demanded of one of his men.
"Unknown, sir, but it came from the direction of the main gatehouse." Even as they spoke, they could hear the sound of gunfire echoing from other parts of the castle. Marcus's expression grew increasingly desperate as he realized that his conspiracy was facing armed resistance. "Captain Fletcher," Princess Amelia said with satisfaction, "you underestimated the loyalty of the royal guards. Impossible. We identified all the potential threats among the security forces."
"You identified the ones who asked questions openly. You missed the ones who were smart enough to investigate quietly." Another explosion, closer this time, sent vibrations through the floor.
The sounds of battle were growing louder and closer. "Sir," one of Marcus's men reported urgently, "we're receiving reports of Royal Guard units advancing on the castle from multiple directions. They're demanding the immediate release of the royal family." Marcus grabbed Princess Amelia roughly by the arm. "It appears your escape message was more successful than I anticipated. But you're still our insurance policy." As they moved through the castle corridors, Princess Amelia could see the full scope of the battle raging around them. Windows were shattered, furniture was overturned as barricades, and she could smell smoke from fires burning elsewhere in the building. But she could also see something that filled her with hope. Many of the castle staff were actively resisting Marcus's people. Servants were providing intelligence to the royal guards, groundskeepers were cutting power lines to disrupt communications, and even some of the guards who had initially supported Marcus were switching sides as they realized the true nature of his conspiracy. The castle had become a battlefield, but it was a battlefield where the forces of loyalty and tradition were fighting back against betrayal and foreign manipulation. As they reached the main hall, Princess Amelia saw her parents for the first time since the crisis began. They were under guard but appeared unharmed, and their eyes filled with relief when they saw her.
"Amelia!" Princess Catherine called out. "Are you hurt?"
"I'm fine, Mother, but we need to end this." Prince William looked at Marcus with a mixture of anger and disappointment. 15 years of trust, Marcus. 15 years of treating you like family. How could you betray us like this? I told you before, pragmatism. Valdoria's independence was always temporary. I simply chose to be on the winning side of an inevitable transition. The only thing that's inevitable is your trial for treason, Prince William replied coldly.
The sound of approaching boots echoed through the hall, and Captain Fletcher appeared with a squad of royal guards, their weapons drawn and their faces grim with determination.
"Your Highness," Captain Fletcher said with relief, "we've secured the castle. Marcus Hartwell and his associates are under arrest for treason, espionage, and conspiracy to overthrow the government."
As Marcus and his co-conspirators were led away in chains, Princess Amelia felt a profound sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. The crisis was over, but the cost had been enormous.
The state dinner was cancelled, obviously, but the Northmere delegation actually expressed greater confidence in Valdoria's government after witnessing how effectively the kingdom had dealt with an internal security threat. In the days that followed, the full scope of Marcus's conspiracy became clear.
The investigation revealed that Eastmarch had been planning a gradual takeover of Valdoria for years, using a combination of economic pressure, political manipulation, and intelligence gathering to weaken the kingdom from within. But the conspiracy's failure had the opposite effect.
The crisis unified the kingdom's people behind the royal family and demonstrated that Valdoria's institutions were strong enough to resist even sophisticated attempts at subversion. Princess Amelia was acclaimed as a hero for her role in exposing the plot, but she took no joy in the recognition.
The experience had taught her that the price of leadership was constant vigilance against those who would abuse trust for personal gain. As she stood on her balcony overlooking the castle grounds, now peaceful once again, she reflected on the lessons she had learned.
She was still only 12 years old, but she now understood that being a princess meant more than titles and ceremonies. It meant accepting responsibility for protecting the people and institutions that depended on her family's leadership. Thomas approached her on the balcony, his arm still in a sling from injuries sustained during the final battle.
"Any regrets, Princess?" he asked, "about exposing the conspiracy?"
"None at all. About the danger we put ourselves in?" Princess Amelia considered the question seriously. "I think we did what we had to do. Sometimes protecting the people you love means taking risks, and sometimes it means growing up faster than you'd like. Perhaps. But I'd rather grow up protecting my family than remain a child and watch them be destroyed."
As the sun set over the peaceful kingdom of Valdoria, Princess Amelia made a silent promise to herself and to her people. She would never again allow her family or her kingdom to be vulnerable to betrayal from within.
The price of freedom, she now understood, was eternal vigilance, and she was prepared to pay that price for as long as she lived.